Welcome to Good Management is Not, the web TV show dedicated to successful management. I'm your host, Joel Quast, author of Good Management is Not Firefighting. Having owned 4 businesses and worked 35 years in management, I'm here to tell you that there really isn't anything new in management theory. However, there are new ways of looking at things. Today we're going to talk about stress and the need for humor in the workplace. Abraham Lincoln, during the dark days of the Civil War, was famous for using humor to lighten the situation. President Lincoln was not able to be here tonight, but I'm pleased to say that First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln has graciously agreed to talk about stress and humor in the workplace. Please welcome to Good Management is Not, Mary Todd Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Quast.
Mrs. Lincoln, it's an honor to have you here today. Your husband was famous for his use of humor as a way to get his message across.
Oh yes, in fact, I brought with me a letter he wrote to the commander of the Army after the Battle of Chancellorsville. If I may read it?
Please do.
In it he writes to General Hooker, "If possible, I would be very glad of another movement early enough to give us some benefit from the fact of the enemy's communications being broken. Have you already in your mind a plan wholly or partially formed? If you have, prosecute it without interference from me. If you have not, please inform me, so that I, as incompetent as I may be, can try to assist in some formation of a plan for the Army."
Now that, Mrs. Lincoln, is getting your point across.
Yes, certainly my husband wasn't a mean man. However, he knew how to get a rise out of people, to motivate them to action.
Now tell me about his relationship with General Grant.
Oh yes, he had a special fondness for General Grant. I didn't know him very well, as he was a very quiet man. I recently heard someone say that Grant was someone who could be silent in several languages.
Well, there's a quote attributed to your husband about Grant when they were talking in a room full of politicians. What was it your husband said to lighten the mood?
Oh yes, one of the politicians said General Grant is a drunkard. Mr. Lincoln retorted, "Well, find out what whiskey he's drinking and send a case to all my generals if it will get the same results."
So Mr. Lincoln knew that Grant was the only general winning battles.
Yes, and I personally do not approve of drinking in any form. However, the war needed to be won.
Mr. Lincoln was smart enough to realize that he had to focus on what he could do and not on what he could not. What else did Mr. Lincoln say about stress or humor in the workplace?
Well, Mr. Lincoln was aware that increased stress is associated with a decreased immune system. Mr. Lincoln also understood that if you're highly stressed in the workplace, that very little innovation can occur. And certainly he didn't say laughter is the best medicine. However, those are words he lived by.
Mrs. Lincoln, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Now I must be going. My husband and I have tickets to the theater.
Thank you. Remember, when faced with a very serious project, what may be needed is a shot of lightheartedness in order to allow people to think creatively. And don't get so caught up in your job that you're working 24 hours a day. Remember what John Lennon said, "Life is what happened to you while you're making other plans." This concludes another episode of Good Management is Not. Tune in again next week, and remember, good management is not firefighting.